Committee members are present in Bridgewater House and the meeting is also available via Teams. Please note that the meeting is being recorded, and can I remind all those in the room to turn your mobile phones off or to silent, and can those joining us online please turn off your cameras and microphones so that the meeting isn't disturbed. I'll now introduce those taking part in the committee today. To my left are officers from our legal and democratic teams, and to my right are the planning officers who will present the applications. On the wings of the table are the councillors who will debate and decide the applications. The format will be as per the published agenda, and a copy of the officer reports can be found on the council website. Each application will be taken in turn. Officers will outline each application, followed by public speaking time. Only members of the public who have registered to speak can make representation, and councillors around the table will then debate and decide on each application. During the debate, there will be a proposer and a seconder for a resolution. Members will vote on the proposal. Only members who have been present throughout the whole application will be able to vote, and the voting options are for, against, abstain or defer. Votes will be counted and the results announced. Okay, so we'll now go into the main body of the meeting as per the agenda. And first of all, agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Jill Slocum. She's been substituted by Councillor Lance Duddridge.
Excellent, thank you. Minutes from the previous meeting on pages 17 to 22 on your agenda. Are they agreed as a correct record? Yeah, thank you. All in agreement? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Ms. Lehman, can you take us through the declarations, please?
So, the members put their hands up if they have any declarations of interest, please. Bob Filmer.
Yeah, I've got a couple of NRIs relating to the application 242317. That's the East Brent application, and 312002, the Lymsham application. That's within my division. I attend the parish council meetings, but taken no part in debate on those applications. I also have an NRI as a member of the Drainage Board at Axbrew.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you. Yes, same as Councillor Filmer, except the Drainage Board one.
Except for what, sorry?
Except for the Drainage Board. I'm not on the Drainage Board. I think it's pages 48, 49. It's the 2 applications.
Councillor Henry.
I'm on the Axbrew Drainage Board. Thank you.
And Councillor Bolt.
Thank you. I've referred items 6 and 7, the advertising on the roundabouts. They're in my division. I've taken no part in the discussions, and I'm able to make a decision based on the presentation today.
So as long as you'll come into the committee with an open mind and you're willing to listen to all the arguments and debate and the merits of the application, then that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got those? So for the members of the public, you've heard that some members have declared an interest because they are members of the Internal Drainage Board and some members are parish councillors. When they say they've taken no part, it means that they haven't taken part at parish council on the consultative stage of any application that's before the committee today, or when that committee has been consulted by the IDB. So they're coming to the committee with a fresh mind. They are not predetermined, so they will listen to all the merits of the arguments before making a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. We go on to item 4 on the agenda, and that's public question time. There are some members of the public who've registered to speak today, and when we come to the application that you've registered for, I will call you up to the table in the front, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. We then go on now to the applications themselves. Agenda item 5 on page 23. And this is a major planning application, land on the north side of Lypiat Lane in Shipham, Winscombe. We have Miss Elvie online on Teams who is going to take us through this application. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. You can hear me, I'm assuming. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. Okay, that's good. Yes, so before us, this is the application in Shipham for the change of use of agricultural land to be a mixed agricultural and equestrian use, including the erection of a stable block and a hay machinery store. So this is classed as a major application because the area of land within the red line is more than a hectare, which is why it's classed as a major application. Next slide, please. So following legal advice and since the publication of the report, it's been recommended that condition 5 is amended to only limit the equestrian use of the proposal to be for private purposes. This is due to the land being in existing agricultural use. So the condition is therefore proposed to read, the equestrian element of the development hereby approved shall solely be used for the private needs of the owner and for no commercial purpose. Next slide, please. So this is the list of the policies that are relevant to this application from the Sedgemoor local plan. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we move on to the application site itself. So circled in yellow on the plan here, it's a field located to the east of the village of Shipham and is accessed by a public bridleway, which we'll see some photos of shortly. Next slide, please. So the application site here is outlined in red. It's currently an agricultural field and the site is within the Mendip Hills AONB designation. And as you can see, there are some residential properties in vicinity of the site, but not, immediately close to it. Okay, next slide, please. So the application seeks consent for the change of use of the field to be a mixed agricultural and equestrian use. And this would include the erection of a stable building, which is the building on the left, and an agricultural storage building, which is to the right. The proposal would utilise the existing field access, which is detailed on this plan. Next slide, please. So these are drawings of the buildings that are proposed. So at the top left, you have the agricultural storage building, which would measure approximately 9 by 4.65 metres with a ridge height of 2.9 metres. And then the other drawing towards the bottom of the slide shows the proposed stable building, which would measure approximately 22.9 by 4.8 metres, also with a ridge height of 2.9 metres. Both buildings are proposed to be finished with timber cladding and box profile sheeting to the roof. Next slide, please. So we then move on to photos of the site. So this is taken from Street View, and this is the bridleway that approaches the site. As you can see, whilst it is a bridleway, it has got a consolidated surface, so it is used by vehicles. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the field access. Apologies for the weird photo. I had to stitch two photos together, hence why the car looks a bit bizarre, to sort of show the access. So as you can see, there is a pull-in area where the car is parked, and then you have a gate to the left and then another gate as well there to allow access. Next slide, please. So this is then a view as stood sort of in the field immediately next to the access, as you can see. So this is looking towards the east, and it's along that hedgerow to the right of the photo where the proposed hay barn is to be located. Next slide, please. So this is stood in the same location, just looking towards the north. As you can see, the land sort of undulates as it goes up to the north. Next slide, please. And then this is a view towards the west. So along the hedgerow to the left is where the proposed stable building would be. That building you can see, that sort of apex, is the garage of the nearest residential dwelling, just for reference. Next slide, please. And then this is a view stood within the application site looking back towards the access. So as you can see, it's got hedgerow all around the field boundaries. Okay, next slide, please. So as this application is classed as a major because of the site area and it is within the AONB, it's worth considering paragraph 177 of the NPPF, which sets out that applications for major development should be refused when they're in the AONB. However, this is further elaborated that it is a matter for the decision maker whether a proposal is a major development when considering the nature, scale and setting, and whether the development could have a significant adverse impact on the protected landscape. Considering this, it's the officer's view that as the vast majority of the site will remain as is, and the introduced equestrian use would be at a scale to serve private needs for the applicant, along with the need for a rural location for such a use, that the principle of the development in this respect is supported. Next slide, please. So then when considering the policies of the local plan, in respect to the principle of development, policy CO1 sets out that development is permissible in the countryside where there is a specific locational requirement. As the use of the land requires a rural location, it's considered to be compliant with this policy. In terms of visual amenity of the proposal and potential impact on the protected landscape, the proposed buildings are considered to be of a size and scale that is appropriate for the intended use. And due to the modest size of the buildings and the traditional material finishes to be used, they're not considered to have a detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the site or the wider protected landscape. In terms of surface water management, as this application's class as a major, we had to consult the LLFA and they've requested conditions to secure drainage details. In terms of residential amenity, the closest dwellings approximately 24 metres from the nearest proposed building. Environmental health did recommend a condition to ensure that bedding and manure was stored in a considerate manner. However, it's the officer's view that due to the distance of the dwelling, it's not considered to be reasonable to impose such a condition. And in terms of the built form of the buildings themselves, due to their siting, the proposal would not have a detrimental impact in terms of overdominance or overshadowing. Moving on to highway safety, the application site already benefits from vehicular access. As the proposal is only to be used for private use, there's not considered to be an over-intensification of this access that would give rise to an unacceptable impact on highway safety. Next slide, please. Moving on to ecology, the ecologist has reviewed the submission and they've recommended appropriate conditions in terms of adequate mitigation measures and biodiversity enhancement. The site itself, the application site's atop of an archaeological site, so South West Heritage have been consulted and they raised no objection to the proposal. Therefore, with all of this considered, it's the officer's recommendation that the application is approved with the conditions to secure the equestrian use to be private, surface water drainage details to be provided, and the provision of biodiversity enhancement and mitigation measures. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We have one speaker on this application, and that is Miss Blake, the applicant. Can I move it on, please? That's all, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
You can, yes. Can I just remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak? You will be reminded when you have 1 minute to go. But
great, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this meeting. It's quite sad actually seeing those beautiful summer photos and reminiscing about the beautiful weather we had. So I bought this land at auction in May. It's sort of a bit of a lifetime dream of mine to own land. I've lived locally in Shipham for 20 years, and this field's only actually a few hundred metres from my house. So I'm able to walk to the site to tend to my animals. So it doesn't really add additional carbon footprint in that respect. I want to use the land to keep my horses and my expanding flock of sheep, and this has led to this planning application. So it's providing stabling and the shelter which will be used by the sheep as well as the horses, and the storage building is for hay which I plan to make from the field, which will then provide winter feed for the animals. So I took great thought, time and expense preparing this application for planning permission. I spoke to the neighbours, local people, and also took pre-application advice from the council. I think Amelia's sort of covered the topography of the land quite well. So it is a sort of gentle valley. There's no public rights of way running across the field. But because of the topography, actually, there are very limited views from public rights of way nearby. And this proposed siting of the buildings backing onto the southern boundary hedge near the existing access was selected after the pre-application advice, and was selected really to be the least visually intrusive, but also it allows minimisation of groundworks and damage to the soil structure there. I believe the buildings are a modest scale and are sympathetic timber construction. So as Amelia sort of said, my horses are ridden and they require additional feeds and rugs, and I didn't interpret this use of land to fall under grazing of agricultural land, which is why I've applied for this change. Sorry.
Just to let you know, sorry to stop your flow. There's 1 minute left. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm nearly finished. So this is why I've applied for the change of use to the mixed agricultural and equestrian. I think it allows me the flexible use of the land in line with my intentions. It also makes it much easier for the council to enforce rather than me having equestrian use just applied to a sort of small area of that land. But obviously this has led to this major application and has caused some confusion with local people asking me questions. But nonetheless, I do believe that this site is well placed to support my intended use and the proposed minor development. And I am passionate about maintaining and enhancing the beauty and biodiversity of this area. I'm really fortunate to live here, and that's my long-term plan really. I hope to continue to use and maintain this field in a way that is sympathetic to the area. And thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members, now open it up for debate. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Filmer.
Thank you very much. I mean, it seems like a very sensible, well put together application. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions of the case officer. In terms of the siting of the proposed stable and the store, there's, I think from the photographs we saw earlier, there's a hedge that runs alongside the existing access. Are they set back far off enough back that the hedge isn't impacted by the development? I didn't notice in the conditions that there was a landscaping condition. So should that hedge be conditioned for retaining? By the sounds of what the applicant said, I think it's only likely it's going to come out, but I don't think there's anything in there that maintains that, because obviously if the hedge went, then it would change the whole aspect of that view. And the final question was just to do with the lighting condition. It says it's there for bats, so obviously it needs condition for that. But in terms of this area, it's open countryside, should there be something there, just making the reference to the fact that it's for amenity as well, which we've often done in the past, just so it's not purely a wildlife thing, it is the fact that it's dark skies and just trying to keep lighting down to a minimum.
Thank you, Councillor Filmer. In terms of the hedgerow, there isn't a condition to secure it. Looking at the site plan, I think part of it is sort of outside of the red line anyway. If you see where sort of behind the stable, there's a sort of a gap, isn't there, between the boundary of the site and the bridleway. I'll let Dean make a comment on whether or not we should impose a condition for that. In terms of the lighting design, I'm happy to add to the reason again if Dean thinks it's suitable. Yeah, over to you, Dean.
Thank you. I mean, I think there is enough separation space looking at the plan, and I suspect it's highly unlikely the applicant has any intention of doing anything to this hedgerow. I think if members were concerned, we could impose a condition to control impacts on the hedgerow during construction. I wouldn't suggest that we need to be trying to secure the hedgerow in any length of time other than that, because usually you would need TPOs to secure them in perpetuity anyway. But if members felt such that we needed hedgerow protection measures, for example, during the construction period, we have standard wording and condition that we could impose in that circumstance. And I think regarding the other lighting point, I don't know if Millie picked up on it, but certainly we can tweak the reason to make sure it reflects those two issues, ecology and amenity.
Thank you. I've noticed on condition 4 there is a biodiversity enhancement plan as well, so we wouldn't be expecting any reduction but in habitat, would we? But if whoever proposes, if anyone proposes to grant permission and they're happy to include that, that would be great, about not disturbing the hedgerow. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. How many horses is involved in this?
Is that a question for me to answer?
No, sorry, I'm afraid
Sorry.
it's just councillors, the officers now. Thank you.
Considering based on the stable floor plan, I imagine, well, there's tack room, 2 hunter boxes and a static field shelter. So based from that, I'm assuming 2. I'll have a look at the supporting information. Sorry, just bear with me.
To make our lives easier, I'm advised that we can seek clarification from you, Miss Late, as to how many horses there are.
Thank you. Yes, I have 2. I can't guarantee I won't acquire 1 more.
Okay, thank you very much.
How many was that, Mr. Chairman?
2 currently.
Seems to be an option on the thought.
Yes.
Okay, and thank you, Max. Thank you very much. And the second question is, quite a few buildings going in this plot of land again, and there's no mention of trees at all. I know there's a landscape scheme set up within it, but that's only for hedges. I would have thought some trees planted with much higher, I'm a farmer, believe it or not, and I do believe in some of these things. I see a lot of buildings got today with no screening at all, and it looks absolutely poor. Especially in Shipham, you're in the Mendips, you're in an A and a B, and you do all you can to sweeten them up, really, I would have thought.
Thank you. Mr. Titchener, do you want to do that?
I mean, the hedgerows are quite mature and quite established and of a reasonable height. The buildings, I think Millie said the heights were only 2-point-something meters. So actually, that's a pretty low profile building, I would suggest. I would hope that the hedgerows that are there, providing if we feel the need to protect them during construction, would be sufficient in long term. There is an enhancements condition that the ecologist recommended, and they would need to discharge that. There's a variety of things they could do to that if they felt it was appropriate to do tree planting, but they might not feel actually it's quite difficult to put plants when you've got an existing mature hedgerow, whether it would make sense for them to be located outside the hedgerow. That might also be other things like bird or bat boxes on the side. That's a condition. We'll deal with the details later, but it's certainly an option if they felt the trees was appropriate, that potentially that could come forward, but we'll have to wait and see on that point.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
With the comments that were made earlier by the officers, I have to move the recommendation. I think there was an amended condition and then the 2 relating to lighting and hedge protection. Thank you.
That's right. There's amended condition number 5, which is about protecting the equestrian elements of the application to be used solely for private needs. And then there was an addition to condition 3, if you're happy to accept this, around the lighting for ecology and amenity purposes. And then there was an additional condition around protecting the hedgerow during construction. Are you happy to accept them? Thank you. So we have a proposer to grant. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Hendry.
Totally fine, Chair. I've heard everything. Presentation was first class. I'm happy to second, Councillor Palmer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder to grant permission. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. So now we will move on to agenda item 6, which is an application at. Sorry.
Yeah, just checking which one we've got the right one up. The east end.
Right here. Okay, sorry. Agenda item 6, planning application at Cannington bypass roundabout at the east end in Cannington. And that's on page 33 of your agenda. And Mr. Noon, you're going to take us through this one, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you. This is an application for 3 non-illuminated freestanding advertising signs, one to go opposite each of the original arms of the roundabout at the eastern end of the Cannington bypass. Just to show you where we are, this roundabout circled in yellow. There is now a 4th arm into the new development just to the east of that roundabout, but that's not going to get a sign at this point. So there is the roundabout for the purposes of the site location plan. The red line is around the island in the middle. And to show you where the signs would go, one facing south, one facing west, and one facing north. And you can then see, I think it's called Potter's Way. There wouldn't be one there, but that goes into the recently constructed development just to the east. Typical sign that would go up. These are identical on all three identical signs. Total height there, if you allow above the carriageway, including sort of a little bit of the raised island, it's just under a metre, so 88.5 centimetres high. So very low key, about a metre long. The signage would be to be agreed by whoever takes the signage option, but we would have probably, I think they're recycling some application drawings here. It probably wouldn't say County Council with red letters, it'll probably say Somerset Council in blue letters, but we're not being asked to approve the actual writing. It's just, for now, the sign that they want to put up, or we want to put up indeed. Just go here, just looking at starting off looking north at the roundabout, coming to Bridgewater's behind, courtesy of Google Earth. You can see you've got the chevron signs. It's not dissimilar to that in terms of its height, and it wouldn't obscure that. So then looking from the west, looking back at it, again, there'll be one just on the roundabout there, again, missing the chevron height. The next sign is just looking down from the north, though Cannington Village is behind here, and then will be a sign on there on the roundabout facing. And then just sort of moving around a little bit, you can just see just off to the left, that's into Potter's Way. And then just final photograph there, just to show where the sign would be just to the right of those chevrons. That will be the sign you would see as you leave Cannington. So as an application for advertisement, there are only two issues, namely public safety and amenity. Public safety in terms of road safety, the highways officers are content that this application complies with the internal advice that's been issued for this sort of thing, and that there will be no adverse impact on the safe operation of the roundabout. In terms of the signs, their visual impact themselves, they are low key. They are no more visually intrusive, in my opinion, than the existing chevron signs. That is not to say that the images on there might not be so slightly different. We don't know what those are. We're not being asked to approve those. It's just merely the place where they would be put. So on that basis, this application recommended for approval subject to the standard advertising conditions and the condition just to sort of set out the plans that we are approving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. New. We have no speakers on this item, so it's for members. Please, Councillor Bolt.
Thank you. I'm not averse at all to signage on roundabouts and everything, but those two particular roundabouts, there's an information overload because you've got all the Hinkley, all of the additional signage directing vehicles for construction vehicles to different gates and setups on the approach to those roundabouts. That's my only concern as a road safety aspect. I know that those are only going to be temporary signs, but there's an awful lot of information as you approach these roundabouts.
I appreciate these are it's mostly courtesy of Google Street View. There's also the case officer photographs in there. Yes, there is quite a bit of signage on the arms of the roundabout, particularly as you go, I think, west along the bypass. I think that's probably the bit where I noticed the most signage. That much said, it's not really seen in the same views as of the roundabout itself. All we can see on the roundabout in terms of signage is just purely functional highway signage about the chevrons. I'm sure the highways officer is aware of the signage around here. The guidance that they work to when they're putting together these applications is very tight. And in that respect, I do have to defer to the advice we've received from the highways officer. I think looking at these photographs, I agree with them. I don't think there is so much signage on the roundabout, so we would risk compromising things in any way. Obviously.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Chair. I don't see any problem whatsoever with this, given the speed the traffic actually approaches it roundabout in the first place, which is very slow either way you come from. The signage is not out of place, wouldn't distract anybody at all that I can see. Absolutely no problem, and on that basis, I'm quite happy to move the recommendation to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hendry. Do we have a second? Councillor Bradford. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to speak then. Sorry. So we have a proposer and a seconder to grant advertisement consent. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 in favour. Any against? 1, 2, 2 against.
And that's everybody, isn't it? No
13
abstentions.
members. Oh, yes, right.
Okay, thank you. That is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is a very similar application, and this is for the Kennington Bypass Roundabout West Side on page 37 of your reports. Mr. Noon, you're taking us through this one again, aren't you? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very similar application at the other end of the bypass on the roundabout, where there are 4 arms, and they will be looking at 4 of the identical signs, one opposite each arm. There, right, so sorry, there is the roundabout circled in yellow at the other end of the bypass. There is the red line for purposes of application again on the island in the middle. And the 4 signs as per the previous sign, application, one opposite each arm. Again, it's the same sign, the same height and dimensions. And then just looking here, this is coming in, I think it's coming in from the east, looking at the roundabout, similar to the previous roundabout, there is a clump of vegetation in the middle, and the signs would be seen against that. And then again, we would have them sort of positioned so as to avoid obscuring the chevron signs. And then just looking around to the next arm and looking back, there is the road, the Hall Road up towards Hinckley, just on the left there. And then from there, looking down, so this is back to Hinckley. And then finally going round, that's from the east arm. Back in. And then again, as with an advert application, the same 2 issues apply: highway safety and amenity. Again, the signs are not considered to be visually intrusive or any way inappropriate to the detriment of visual amenity. And the highways advice is that these would not prejudice the safe operation of the roundabout. And again, the application is recommended for approval subject to the same conditions, namely the standard 5 advert applications and a plans list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Again, no speakers, so it's open for members for debate.
Just to be clear, this is again just paying just for the signs.
All the yes,
and no advertisement on them.
Yeah. The individual adverts can be placed on them probably with deemed consent. It's the structure that will host the advert that we're looking at here, essentially.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Like Mr. Noon, same comments. It is information overload. It is an A39, the A39 there, it's 50 mile an hour. There's enough interesting moments on those 2 roundabouts.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. This is a carbon copy of the one before, as you can all see that. Same comments, I don't have to go for them again. Happy to move the recommendation to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson, thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder to grant advertisement consent. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 4,
And against.
and 2 against.
Thank you.
That's 13 members.
Thank you. So that is carried. Thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item 8, and this is the application for Red House Road, East Brent. And on page 41, Mr. Noon, you'll be taking us through this one, won't you? Thank you.
Apologies, I think the description of development there. It's, you can just check there. I think that's guilty of overwriting a slide here.
Mic on.
Apologies, the bottom bit in smaller print there, it's obviously a recycling of a slide here. This is it's not retrospective, it's not a single story application. It, as per the papers, it is for the proposed erection of a 2-story rear extension. So just to look at here, we are the most northern property on Red House Road. On the left-hand side, as you go up, it's the last one on the left. And in sort of closer detail there, it's a 2-story house with a conservatory at the rear. Conservatory goes, and we get a 2-story full-width rear extension. So the purposes of the application, the red line is around the house and garden. They also own some land to the rear. It has had some unauthorised change of use on it, a garden extension. That is not, they're not seeking to regularise this as part of this application. That remains to be dealt with through enforcement if necessary, or through an application to regularise that use. But just to stress, it's not part of this application. I'll show you some slides of what's going on there in a moment. So the block plan, here you can see the little floating roof plan just to the top right. That's actually the existing, I've just put that in there. It's not another house to the northwest, northeast. That is the existing roof plan to give you an idea of what is proposed. So the conservatory is removed. The conservatory is moved, and then it's a full width 2-story extension with 2 gables facing into the garden, and effectively in between that cat slide roof, extending out over to the new rear building line. You can see it does extend beyond the neighbour to the south, but starts from that property that property's building line is a little bit further back than the main house's building line. So with some existing elevations there, top left with the conservatory on it, that's the rear elevation. The front would be unchanged, and then the sides would obviously see the conservatory gone and the new extension. The flank walls will be visible. So just in terms of the existing floor plan, you've got a sort of garage. You've got the former garage to the front that's now additional accommodation, but we're looking here at the rear and the conservatory that will be removed. So the proposed elevation, that's the front at the top left, so that is unchanged. And then there's one of the side elevations at the bottom there. You can see that's some windows in the side elevation that would face north, away from the neighbouring property over farmland. So they're not an issue. And then the top left there, that's the new rear elevation. So you have those 2 gables facing in, and then the cat slide roof in between them, just the gap. And then the bottom one is the side elevation that the neighbour would see, and that has no windows. So the proposed floor plans, it is a sort of, you get a sort of large open plan kitchen diner with a sitting room at ground floor, and then at the top, at first floor level, it is extended bedroom. So it is currently a 4-bedroom property. It would remain a 4-bedroom property. They would just be bigger bedrooms.
And there's the roof plan, just orientated again. So some photographs. There's the existing conservatory and the neighbour to the south. Then just panning the other way slightly in camera, and you see an open field on the north side. From the neighbour's side, you can see there, neighbour is slightly further back than the building line, and you see the conservatory sort of like the other side of the fence. And they're just all looking from the back of the neighbour's house across the rear. Stood in the applicant's garden, looking into that area to the rear that is owned by them, but not part of this application. As you can see, the garden use has been extended out into that land. That needs to be regularised. There is an IDB issue. There was a REEN there. It doesn't seem to be a REEN there anymore. Something has gone on there. With potentially some infilling. That is something the IDB are, I believe they're aware of. They certainly need to become involved to deal with that. But that is not part of this application. We're not looking to regularise that or in any way extend the garden use here. It is simply this extension. And then just stood right at the back there, just sort of looking back at the house. And then just turning the camera and looking south from that garden extension, it would appear that there may be some other things going on here that also need regularising. That is something that we will deal with in the round outside of this current application. So in terms of the key issues, the visual impact and the design we consider to be appropriate. It's matching materials. It's not raising the roof line or anything like that. It is we feel it is an appropriate extension that would meet the requirements, design requirements of policy D2. The relationship with the neighbours, we accept that there is a neighbour concern here. However, given the depth of the extension, the fact that this house is slightly out of line with the neighbour, given that it's to the north of the neighbour, we do not feel that this new flank elevation would be unduly oppressive or take away undue amount of light from the neighbour. In that respect, we believe this will comply with the requirements of policy D25 in respect of maintaining neighbour amenity. In terms of highways, it's been raised an issue here. There is no increase in the number of bedrooms, and therefore the existing parking arrangements remain considered acceptable to meet the needs of this property. There has been an issue raised in terms of construction workers parking. However, that is something that we feel can be reasonably managed through the normal course of what would be a passing phase of construction. The change of use of land is noted. Our enforcement officers are aware of that. However, that does not form part of this application, and we will deal with that elsewhere, and if necessary by enforcement, and that can be resolved elsewhere. So on that basis, the application is considered to be acceptable. We do acknowledge the concerns, but we do feel that they are not supportable in this instance. We recommend approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. We have 3 speakers on this application, and I'd like to call Mr. Widdop to the table, please. Yeah, 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start. And we'll
Sorry,
set the
before I
timer.
start, can I just clarify, we're the neighbour. My wife and I are the neighbour that you saw in that image.
Thank you.
Okay. The planning officer reports concludes that the application complies with policies D25 and D2, and we disagree with that. Under D25, the officer concludes that the extension wouldn't be domineering and states that because the extension will be on the rear of the property, there'd be minimal visual impact on the neighbour. That's a quote. We contend that the exact opposite is the case here. The front of our house only has a driveway and a tiny gravel area. That goes onto a turning bay. There's no other usable area at the front of the property. And we feel that when the houses were planned in the 90s, that the planners would have recognised that the limited amenity space at the front of a house was more than offset by the greater amenity at the rear of the property. Because there's a rear garden, it faces onto what was once an open field and onto fields beyond that. In fact, most of the living that my wife and I do is at the rear of that property, either in the house or in the garden when weather permits. So we submit that actually a two-storey extension replacing that conservatory is going to have a major visual impact and on our ability to use that garden. We've never really complained about light or windows. We recognise the design. Policy D2 actually has an element that says that all developments have to respect the amenity value of the occupiers of nearby buildings. And that element doesn't appear to be confined to the visual aspect of the front, from the front of a property or from public access points like the right of way at the rear of our house. The office concludes that the proposed extension will have no visual impact upon the scene of Red House Road, and whilst acknowledging that it can be seen from the public right of way at the rear of the houses, it maintains scale, design and detail, respect the form and character of the existing building. We suggest that whether the extension could be seen by somebody who's delivering a parcel or crossing a right of way into a field pales into insignificance when compared to the visual impact on the people that actually have to live there now or in the future. So we suggest that on that issue alone, it fails D2. We note the officer's comments about the regularisation of the agricultural land, which is being used as residential. And I think what we'd say is we were just surprised that this application can actually be considered in the first place before that issue is dealt with. We realise they're not connected, but we're just surprised. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddock. You've raised some issues, but I will ask the next two speakers and then Mr. Noon to pick up any issues at the end.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Can I call Mr. Bray, representing East Brent Parish Council, please?
That's gone sleep.
Are you all right there?
Yeah, excuse me. Sitting down too long.
As before, you have 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The parish council have rejected this proposal on the following 3 grounds. Despite the officer's comments regarding the dominance, that it has no dominance, the rear proposal extension being 2-storey will overshadow and will be visually dominant due to its nearly 7 metres high in plan, which is contravening policy D25. It also contravenes policy D25 clause 7.213. And finally, on this aspect, there's been no consideration regarding the microclimate that an extension of that mass will cause, with the wind tunnel effect that will be caused and turbulence in that corner with number 23. Item 2, the FRA submitted with the application makes no reference to the fact that the drainage ditch to the north of the site boundary, which is from the garage out to Red House Road, has in fact been filled in. This will hinder the surface water runoff from the agricultural land to the north and the overall filtration of land within the property itself. The development obviously increases the impermeable surface, which will hinder surface water runoff. It also should be noted that the IDB have not visited this site currently. Finally, parking. The current submitted plan indicates 2 parking spaces in front of the old garage. No facility is provided for off-street parking within this area because it's within the Hammerhead area of Red House Road. And any off-street parking has to be confined within the site. Somerset County Transport Policy Parking Strategy, September 2013, page 61, chapter 5.3, states quite clearly a 4-bedroom house requires 3 parking spaces off-road and 1 visitor space. This hasn't been demonstrated by this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. And finally, I'd like to call Ms. Chase, the applicant, please. Again, 3 minutes. Just let us know when you're ready to start.
Thank you. I'm here today on behalf of myself and my partner. As we said, we are the applicants. We placed this application to achieve a family home for us and our 4 children, providing each of them with their own bedroom and displacement of the reception room to provide that bedroom. It's in the place of the existing conservatory and decking area, has been explained. We've been residents of the parish for many years. Our children go to the local schools. It was important for us to stay within catchment. And this home is for us to continue being part of the community that we love as our young family grow. We talked with our architect and planning officer from the outset in relation to the extension, being really cautious that we feel it's proportionate to the house, in keeping with the house design and not being overbearing to the neighbours. And of course, that it's within planning policy, which was well supported. There was a number of points raised by objection to the planning officer by our neighbours, which we responded to and have been included in his report confirming approval. And just to follow up on the points that have been raised today about the drain, it hasn't been filled, the ditch at the bottom of the garden, it hasn't been filled in. The previous owners shared with us when we completed with them the approval by the drainage board for it to be culverted. And that was all I wanted to say today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Noon, would you like to respond to issues that were raised, please?
Well, thank you. On the matter of design, I think, yeah, that is almost by definition a subjective matter. Going to the new rear elevation there, I don't think that is an ugly design. I don't think that is a design in its own right that we could reasonably refuse. It shows a degree of subservience to the main house in terms of the height of the ridge of the top of that catslide roof that comes over as a ridge, the height of the gables. It all sits there as a subservient design. The matching materials is welcome. The scale of the windows, I think, is all appropriate. I think just in pure design terms, I think we would really struggle to say that is such poor design that on it in its own right it should be refused. In terms of the relationship with the neighbours, they're already with rear windows. Oops, right, gone too far. There you go. So top left drawing there are already windows at first floor level looking down out and down the garden. Those windows move out by about 3.5 metres. I don't think that brings them unacceptably closer in terms of any overlooking. In terms of the side elevation, which is what the neighbour would see, bottom drawing there you see that sort of, it's a flank elevation there. That isn't 3.5 metres further back than the neighbours. The neighbours is marginally further back into the garden than this house, so it's not quite 3.5 metres. Well, I don't have that specified as a number, but given the separation there is, you can see there's a sort of still a side passage down both for both properties. So that gap there, I'm guessing, is a 2.5, maybe 3 metres. It's certainly wider than a car, so probably about 2.5 metres. There's a fence there that we can see in one of the photographs. And I think a 2-storey side extension, albeit blank, coming back not as far as that conservatory, when viewed above that fence, I don't think would be so harmful to the living conditions and the enjoyment of the owner of this property that we could reasonably refuse that. I must admit the microclimate thing, it's a new one, thank you. Never come across that in a planning consideration in terms of how the wind might whistle around the corner of a building. I think we would really struggle to quantify that as a reason for refusal. I don't deny it happens. You walk around the corner of Bridgewater House when it's windy, you feel it, it happens. But I don't think you can quantify that as a planning reason for refusal or in any way say how bad it would be here. The parking issue, case officer, I think, has probably glossed over that a little bit, for which I apologise. There is an extra room. Now, what we haven't majored on there is if we look at the extra bedroom, it becomes a 5-bedroom house. Ground floor at the front, currently annotated left-hand side playroom. That becomes bedroom number 5 as proposed. However, that could happen outside of this application. We can't control what people, if someone chooses to put a bed in a room that doesn't currently have a bed. And I think we'd be quite hard put to say that doing that makes this application unacceptable. We do have a bit of an issue, for which I apologise, in that we're clearly shown 2 parking spaces here. Case officer says in his highway section, it can provide 3 parking spaces, which would be the minimum, plus a visitor space. The visitor space could presumably park on, the visitor space. We very often agree that those could be make use of on-street parking where it is available. I think it would be reasonable to add an additional condition. I can't see any reason why they couldn't get another parking space on next to the one on the right as you look there. If members thought that was vital, we could put a condition on to say that we want to see, prior to occupation, we want to see a parking plan that increases the parking here. That would be reasonable. Apologise at that point wasn't picked up. They could do that under permitted development rights as long as it's permeable. Altering that existing area of hard standing currently parked on and provided an extra parking space or 2 wouldn't require planning permission. So I don't think we'd be introducing anything new to the application. And I think we could safely add that condition if that became an important issue for members. Apologies that that has not been picked up in the report. I think it was through in the officer's mind, but because it was the conversion of a room, it didn't sort of develop that line of, didn't explain that. I think that's probably why he got himself to where he is. But an extra condition would pick up on the parking without upsetting the apple cart, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Before we open it up for members to debate, I just to let the Councillor Ham know, because you left the meeting during the debate, you will not be able to vote on this application. Oh, no, that's fine. I'm advised that you should sit in the gallery for this one. Thank you. Members, Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a few points about this I was going to raise, but Adrian and Mr. Adrian has already picked them up. However, things like, for example, the 2 parking spaces, given that this is a couple with 4 small children, are unlikely to have more than actually 2 vehicles anyway. Even if they did, I'm sure they're more than wise of how to create a 3rd parking space for the property should it be required. So I don't actually see a big problem with that. There are no windows, as far as I can see, that overlook the property on the left-hand side. I think I'm right in saying that. Yeah, there's no windows on the site on the 1st floor level that overlook the property next door. The wind tunnel effect, I absolutely don't hold with that whatsoever. It's not a big enough property to have that kind of impact, so I just don't hold with that at all. There are many estates, but this type of property is close together on that height. That's just not a problem. Moving on from that again, nobody is allowed to buy a view. So even if you're in the properties next door to them and couldn't see beyond the house, so that's so be it. So they have the 1st floor. That's life. That's the way it is. There is no main overshadowing on this whatsoever. It's only a small extension by comparison to what some people would have. The way it stands at this moment in time, I've seen everything. The case officer, etc. I've gone through it all. I've even read the paperwork on this one too in some detail. And as we sat here, I have absolutely no problem whatsoever. I'm quite happy to hear what other people say, but yes, I'm in favour of it right at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hendry. Councillor Bolt. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I take my hat off to everybody who's building their own house today. Actually, it's a lot of expense, a lot of risk, and there's an awful lot of complications when it comes to planning. Believe you me, I've done it. I know, and it adds extra expense to what we're doing. But everybody got to do their job. I've got no concerns at all, to be frank. No concerns at all. Only the ditch, and I'm sure the planning office will be able to sort that out after the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Filmer.
Councillor Bolt.
Sorry, Councillor Bolt. Thank you.
The gentlemanly here. Can we just clarify? We need 3 parking spaces plus 1 for visitor, yeah? Now, when you go back to the plan, I must admit, I was looking at it originally, is that there's a garage, which we class as 1, which is probably never used as 1. But the garage has been taken away, hasn't it? Although it still refers to it as garage on there. But it's not big enough for a parking space.
2 wheels only, I think.
Okay. But would that allow 2 vehicles to be parked on the driveway, one behind the other and a third one? Because other than that, we haven't got parking off-road for 3. And a visitor space.
Yeah, I, from the drawing there, no, the drawing is showing 2, there's only 2 room for 2 in front of the former garage. I don't doubt that you could fit extras on by laying some hard standing, just next to those 2 parking spaces. Yeah, as I said, that would be permitted development. You can sort of see here, yeah, there are a couple of trees there that, yeah, we need to, I don't think they're protected. I think there's probably some planting that went in at the time the houses were built. But, you know, it doesn't seem that there is any, I cannot see any obvious impediment to providing a couple of extra parking spaces here if members felt that was essential.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Thank you. And I come to the back fair as well. Yeah, when I read the reports, I put down design, drainage and parking were the 3 things I was interested in, and seeing the layout that we've got. And in terms of design, I can understand why the next door neighbours are concerned, because there will be a big wall that comes when we saw that picture of the rear garden. Whether it's enough that would be that we've got grounds to say no to it on those, I'm not sure, because I think it will obviously change the outlook, but there is still an open area to the side. And in terms of the case officers mentioned, there's already opening windows that are on that existing flank. So in terms of overlooking, it doesn't make it worse on that grounds. The drainage, I think we heard the internal drainage board are following up on this as well, because that certainly does need to be dealt with, because all of us around the knoll with this recent weather have been reminded what floodwater will do. So that does need resolving, but I think that's outside of probably where we are today. The parking is something that does worry me, because knowing that particular road, it is, as I think the parish council mentioned, it's a hammerhead, so you can't park on the edge of the highway, because otherwise people can't turn to go out the road. In terms of they can do it under permitted development rights, can you just confirm, I mean, there are not drop curbs that would allow them to currently get up where, because in effect the drop curb goes where those 2 cars are, so you then couldn't access the other. So would that require permission as part of this if we were to allow it, subject to those extra car parking spaces being sorted? Could those drop curbs be sorted at that time?
Yes, that would be the case. At the moment, just if we can see my cursor there, that isn't drop curbs. What Dean has pointed out to me, courtesy of Street View, is there is room, and it is being used at the moment, for a car to park in here. So Street View is showing a blue car parked in there. It looks a bit tight to get in and out, but it's doable because someone's done it. So I think that's where the case officer got it in his report, that there are 3, you know, they can provide 3 parking spaces. And the Street View is from this year, so it's recent. I don't know, there's a blue car at this property still. It looks like an informal arrangement. It looks like it's parked on grass, so it's not hard standing, but it shows it can be done, which is why I feel it wouldn't be introducing something new by the back door if we ask for details of that as a solution, and then sort of require it to be retained formally.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Just a quick one, can we, I'm not sure if Mr. Noon is able to do it. We can confirm that the applicant actually owns that bit of land, and it isn't just a bit of council land that's been attached to the road.
They, according to the application documents, yeah, they do own it. The red line includes up to the back of the pavement.
Thank you.
Any more debate? Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. On the back of everybody saying I've listened to the something, slide flying, knowing I suppose it's a drain at the back, if somebody wants to put a condition or do that, then that's absolutely fine. However, with everything's been said and what I've said in the presentation, I'm happy to move the recommendation to grant permission. Thank you.
Just for clarification, the drain is a completely separate issue, isn't it? So
We, in the event that the application comes in to regularise that garden use of what's annotated as rear land there, you can see that there's a sort of link through created there. Now, we understand that is an infill. The applicant speaking has said that was all done with the IDB's approval, but you know, that would be checked out at that stage. And I think the parish has referred to this arena along here. It's probably my placing of this roof plan that means that this bit's missing. From this drawing is no evidence one way or the other. If there has been some works to the unauthorised works to that reed, we would follow that up separately, but it's not a matter for this application because this extension doesn't cause that to happen.
okay. And just to clarify, in proposing the officer's recommendation to grant permission, do you wish to add the condition regarding the addition of a parking plan to?
No, I mentioned this already. Given it's a family that's at this moment right now today, they're unlikely to have more than 2 vehicles. Maybe they have, I don't really know, but they're unlikely. If they did want a third space, I'm sure they are more than wise how to do it. And Adrian Noon has just mentioned it. There's a blue car park in there anyway, so the 3 spaces technically are there. But I've no doubt at all that the people who own the property would be more than capable of creating a third property space which would be required. So no, I don't think it can be
Just need
required.
it to be clear.
No, no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Monk.
Thank you. Just wanted to, I think you may have basically just touched on it, but the regularising the land at the back, that's not going to be impacted by what we decide here today and vice versa. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I think with the parking thing, I think just to be very clear, because it's been said, we're not expecting people to be that there's a visitor space that can go on the road. That's not possible. Is that part of the regulation? So you've got 3 on the plan. In theory, you get 3 on there, and somebody mentioned that you should have a visitor space as well. Is that something we're also asking for?
I don't believe that's been requested. Simple fact of the matter here is if any one of the properties at this end here have visitors, I suspect the visitors are parking on the road, particularly if you have more than 2 at a time.
People have said that they're not able to park. Sorry, they're not able to park. Is there a regulation? Is there a traffic regulation they can't, or is that just because of space?
No yellow lines on the road, so it will be a simple matter of you park considerately. Same in any residential street where there are lots of accesses. Not everyone expects all their visitors to be able to park on their own drive. They're certainly looking at the street view. There's a car parked on the road. There are cars parked on the road in street view. I think it happens. It works. It's not the end of the world.
That's fine. I was a little bit concerned because actually from the satellite view that you had up earlier, then I couldn't see any parked in the road at all. But that's.
Councillor Bruce.
Thank you. I'm not 100% sure of the process here, but can I amend the proposal to add the condition for the parking? Is that possible? I do think we need to take into account the fact that this current family have young children, but children grow up. And, the likelihood that that family could have 3 cars is very likely in the future, all future occupants. So I think we do need to make sure that there are 3 parking spaces there. Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be a second motion, because one's without the parking space, one's with the parking space. So both of them's raised a motion, is depends on what's going to be seconded.
So as things stand, we have a proposal for the grant permission as is in the report with no extra condition. I've yet to, there's no seconder as yet. Councillor Filmer, would you?
If Councillor Bruce was making her the proposal, then I'll second the proposal to have it with the parking plan to ensure that there is parking space made available.
Okay, so as things stand, there's no seconder for Councillor Hendry's proposal. Okay, so but we do. Before I, would anyone wish to second that? No?
This is just a point of clarification, the parking, we're just looking for 3 parking spaces on the section.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
only 3.
So that proposal has fallen, and so we go to the proposal by councillor Bruce to grant permission with the addition of a recommendation to add a parking plan which increases the parking. And so that is seconded by councillor Filmer. Are you both happy with that? Okay, so all those in favour, please show.
11 in favour.
Any against?
One against.
One against. Okay, thank you. So that is, permission is granted. Thank you very much. Okay, so does anyone need, before I move on, a comfort break before we go into the last 2 applications? Yeah, okay, so, 5 minutes, if we try and be back for 3:15.
I would
Thank you. Okay.
Good to go. Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, application at Stables, Bridgewater Road, Lymsham. It's for the change of use plan to form one gypsy and travel pitch comprising of a mobile home, touring caravan, erection of a day room, formation of a pony paddock and associated works. It's part retrospective. As you see from some of the photos, the mobile home is already on the site. This just shows location plan. So this is the parcel of land in sort of as outlined in red here. So the mobile home, as we'll see in seconds, located here. There's sort of a commercial sort of cars premises on the north, residential to the south, and then there's other residential in the vicinity on the other side of the road. And again, just looking in a bit more detail, an aerial shot showing the location of the caravan on site at present. Location plan showing the red outline, and with the point of access coming off on which links to the main road here. So that's an existing access, serves a track which sort of goes down the back here, serves the site and serves the adjoining property. This is the block plan showing the site in a little bit more detail. So it shows the position of the mobile home, where the touring caravan would indicatively be parked. The pony paddock, which is the land to the rear, and the day room. The day room's not on site at present, but that's all part of the provision. The static caravan is on site. So these are just plans for the day rooms. Got standard for applications for gypsy and travellers for there to be a separate building operating as a day room. So it has some, it's a functional room in essence. So offering certain facilities for the benefit of the occupants, but generally doesn't include sleeping accommodation. That would be in the mobile home, and that's the elevations of the day rooms. That's quite a typical sort of design for day rooms we see on sites of this nature. So just some site photos. So these are photos just taken from the point of access. So that sort of access that serves a number of properties. So this is looking back down. So you can see you've got pretty good visibility in a long direction going back down the road. So that's looking south, and then again the same. We've got an extensive verge, more verge, so very good visibility looking north. That's part of the little access track that leads down to the gate, which leads into the property in question. Here is the mobile home, site within the middle of the site. There was a sort of an older prefabricated sort of structure here, but this is the broad area that the day room would be to go in. You can see quite a bit of very mature screening on all sides. So actually the site is very well screened from public vantage points. You don't really tend to see it given the sort of the curve of the little access road until you actually pull into the pull-in off of the main road. It's just a little track. I mentioned there's a track that goes down the side, so you can kind of see the edge of the Captain mobile home there. So this goes further around, and then another photograph showing the site. So the caravan centrally located here. A couple more shots just of local context, and just looking back and part of the site there. So the main issues to go over in terms of principal development. So in terms of traveller proposals, so government policy says they must be determined in accordance with the development plan. And the way we have policies to set out our approach, but they are all informed by the Council's Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, which I was undertaking to inform the local plan, and that identified a need for pitches for gypsy and travellers over the period of the local plan. So that's up to 2032 for 69 pitches. Now, with consents, even at the point that the local plan was adopted, there were a number of consents that had already been issued, a number of sites have come forward. There is now, with consents that subsequently been granted since the local plan was adopted, there's still a residual need for 26 pitches across the district up to the period of 2032. And you know, there is another application on the agenda today which includes provision for another 4 pitches, so that potentially, you know, that if both were granted, that would overall reduce the need, but there would still be an outstanding need. The council is also required by government policy to be able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of sites for travellers. We don't have any allocated sites for gypsies and travellers. We do not have a 5-year supply of sites, and that therefore also becomes a material consideration when we look at applications of this nature. Now, the relevant policy is policy D8 that sets criteria about, that we use when determining such applications. So the applicant must meet the definition of gypsy and travellers and accommodation should therefore be limited by condition. We have no doubt that the applicant in this case would meet those requirements. In terms of scale, one of the factors we have to take into account, this is a modest one pitch site. It adjoins a small group of other properties, reasonably well related to Lyncham, could not be considered to dominate the separate community. This is just a one unit site, so very, very modest in scale, naturally. So in terms of access to facilities, it is reasonably well related to service and facilities with footways along the A370 that could be used to connect to the entrance of the village. And some of those services will be sort of within about a kilometre's distance. So there is, you know, it's all walkable. And in that sense, would consider to be reasonably well related, only to be reasonably in the sense rather than right on the doorstep of the policy. So in terms of one of the other main issues, flood risk, and this is one of the big issues that is the issue in effect on this, and this is why this application has been in the system for a number of years and effectively been stuck. So the site lies in flood zone 3A. So that is an area of some of the higher flood risk. See, large parts of Sedgemoor, of the old Sedgemoor area, are flood zone 3A, particularly sort of the more sort of coastal and Somerset level sort of areas. Now, that becomes a potential issue for mobile home type developments for permanent residential occupation, because national planning policy categorises them as a highly vulnerable use. So, and a highly vulnerable uses should not normally be permitted in flood zone 3A. So that's where we are with the difficulty of the application that presented us and why it's taken some time to get to be able to move forward. And the Environment Agency, when commenting on applications of this nature, will maintain an objection in principle on that basis because of the nature of the use, its vulnerability, and the flood risk category that it falls within. Now, the flood zoning doesn't necessarily take into account the presence of flood defences. And there is detailed flood risk assessment accompanying this application that identifies that the undefended, so if there wasn't defences, flood depth across the site in what would be in this, and like the 1 in 200 year flood event would be to a maximum depth of 0.5 metres, increasing to 0.78 metres in a worst case event. So that's a 1 in 1,000 year event. So we're talking about if there were no defences and there was a flood event of that magnitude, we'd be talking about flooding of 0.5 metres or up to 0.7 metres across the site. Now, this site is 4 kilometres behind tidal fences and is further protected by an existing railway embankment 2.5 kilometres away from the site, which is located to the west, so between the site and effectively the sea. So even with potential breaches of these defences and climate change, flood risk assessment that came in with the application, which is a very detailed flood risk assessment, makes the case that floodwaters would not reach the site and that the residual risk is low. They note that the site has no history of flooding, whether tidal or fluvial. So by fluvial, they mean river flooding. And the other factor that has to be taken into account is a decision at a place called Withy Road, so that's in East Huntsville. So that is an appeal decision from an application that was originally submitted in 2016. So that was originally refused by the council. It was a traveller site in flood zone 3A. So, and the decision in that is relevant, and it demonstrates that inspectors will consider the actual risk of flooding to a site. So having undertaken a detailed flood risk assessment and looked at what the real risk is underlying, and balance that against the lack of alternative available sites. And there was also a subsequent scheme at Oakdale in Brent Knoll, which came before, which would have been Sedgemoor's committee in one of the last couple of meetings before before Sedgemoor ceased to exist, with very same circumstances. So that came forward. It was a traveller site in flood zone 3A. The application had been in the system for about 3 years as well, whilst we're trying to work through these issues with the Environment Agency. And what had to happen in that case was we had to do, or the officer in question, Mr. Howlett, had to do a detailed understanding of the residual risk, so the actual risk affecting the site, and undertake effectively a balancing exercise, as the inspector did, and coming to whether to grant. So and the Oakdale decision was granted on that basis. So it's not considered refusal is consistent with how flood risk has been considered by PINS. So the fact that PINS, Planning Inspector, have taken those decisions has given us this particular issue that we've had to wrestle with. And the approach we've taken, we're trying to be consistent with the approach they've taken, is not regarding the objection in principle to the Environment Agency, but weighing up the actual risks of the site. In terms of other matters, and on that basis, we aren't objecting on flood risk grounds because we have reviewed the FRA, we have reviewed risk and the residual risk, and the residual risk through that is identified to be low. In terms of other matters, the design and layout, so the layout is one pitch centrally located, so it seems perfectly reasonable and not objectionable. The Highway Authority has not objected to the proposal, as I think members can see from the photos, they've got very good visibility. The level of traffic generation that would likely arise from one pitch is likely to be very low, so they haven't raised any objection. In terms of drainage, so Western Falls connection is available, but there are drainage conditions proposed to be attached to the permission, for details to be submitted and for drainage details to be secured through that. In terms of visual impact and residential amenity, I think members can see from the photos the site reasonable, well separated from other properties and subject to extensive landscape boundaries treatment, such that actually visually, you're barely going to see it, and it's sufficiently far from other properties that there isn't going to give rise to amenity impacts. One other factor we also have to take into account in cases like this is the public sector equality duty. So Gypsy Travellers, there are a group that have protected characteristics that fall under that. That's a requirement on local authorities to give due regard to those characteristics under the Equalities Act. So they are a racial group that falls into one of those categories, and some weight should be given to that in determining the application. So in terms of the planning balance and overall, we have an unmet need, as I mentioned, in terms of the number of pitches. We have an absence of fire supply. It is compliant with all other parts of the policy of D8. So the one more thorny issue, as I've stated, is the flood risk issue. And notwithstanding the in principle policy objection, we're taking an approach which is consistent with that, with step by pins, balancing risk against the lack of alternative available sites. And given it's acceptable in all other regards, we are therefore recommending that permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Titchener. We have one speaker on this application, and that's Mrs. Ayres, and who is the applicant. Mrs. Ayres, would you like to come to the table, please? And then we'll set the timer when you wish to start.
Oh, hello, I'm Mrs. Ayres, and this is my application. You have to excuse me, my voice is not sharp today. Me and my family have lived at the stables for nearly 4 years now. We moved there in February 2020. After having to move from our previous home that we had in Ashcott, that we had planning permission for more, we had to move. So we had nowhere else to go, and we found this site, we bought it, and we moved on site. That is why it's retrospective. We feel ourselves and our 4 children have settled into the village of Lympsham and the community over the years very well. Our children go to the local school, Lympsham Primary, and they have settled in and made friends. It's very important to us that our children get good education and are happy. Over the years, we have lived at the stables. We have made it our home. To everyone here, this is just another application today, but to us, it's a decision on if we get a home for ourselves and our 4 children. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Filmer?
I think it was this, and the speaker made reference to it. I mean, it's worth noting the registration date of this March 2020. It's been a very long time coming through, and they and the surrounding community have also been waiting for a decision, and it's been a long time coming. The officer has explained the history, and it just so happens that 3 other sites, or this and the other 2 sites, are all happen to be within my patch. So yeah. Couple of questions I wanted to ask. I mean, in terms of the application, I think generally I can't see too many issues with it. I think the applicant has done all they can to try and meet what was needed. A couple of things I just wanted to check, if we can, is in terms of the foul sewage. Can you just double check that that's covered? Because I wasn't sure, I may have missed a condition in there, but normally we have a condition just confirming how that's being dealt with, and I may have missed that. In terms of the flooding, we normally ask for some form of safe refuge that people can go to. Now, I don't know, it may well be the day room will meet that criteria, but we'd just like confirmation that there is some safe area that can be gone to in case of flooding. And the third thing is just a wording I just wanted to check on condition 7. It refers to the SDC tree and native hedgerow planting scheme. Does that now change to count? I know it will be this one that was originally drawn up by Sedgemoor, but as there is no such thing as SDC now, does that need to be tweaked just to make sure it's right? But we'd just like update on the other side.
In terms of the foul, there is a condition on there, so that is condition number 5. So that requires details of a surface water and foul. So a scheme for management of surface water based on sustainable drainage, sustainable drainage principles and foul water to be submitted to and approved in writing. So that covers both those now. In terms of safe refuge, the flood risk assessment noted that the mobile home's already up on a lattice structure, which puts it 0.7 metres above the flood level, so above existing ground levels. So in terms of the worst case scenario, what's been identified as a flood event of 0.78 metres, in effect, that achieves the safe place of refuge. I mean, it's not. Other than that, I think there's probably limited options about what you would probably be able to do realistically anyway. I mean, I think there is a condition about signing up to a flood warning and evacuation plan. So subject to that, if there were a sort of significant event, then they would have a supplemental notification. In terms of the SDC guide, I mean, our previous guidance doesn't become obsolete because of the change. So until such time as it is sort of superseded, it will continue to apply. And that's the same with our local plan in effect in that sense. So yes, it's still relevant, I would suggest.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just follow up. Thank you very much for the comment. Just to say, as I say, the long time it's taken, I think the report explains the EA fact that they've objected to stuff and then not backed up their objections doesn't really help us as a planning authority. So they've helped us take so long on this one. Based on what was in front of us, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford, next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And the concerns that have been brought up by Councillor Phil, I was going to bring that myself, so there's no need to do that at all. And I think the length of time it has taken, the environment's been messed about again is quite a norm. It took 2 years to decide what they were going to do, and I think I quite needed a second this motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bradford. And Councillor Hendry? Okay, so we have a proposer and have a proposer and seconder to grant permission as per the officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Right, and that brings us to the final application of the afternoon, and that's agenda item 10 on page 69, application at Green Paddock, Cossington Lane, Cossington. Mr. Titchener, thank you.
Yeah, just gonna say the same thing. Yeah. That's unusual. Lovely morning, people.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is an application for the change of use to enable formation of 4 pitches for gypsum travellers. So it's a revised scheme. So on land known as Green Paddock, Cossington Lane, Cossington. So the application before members, because of the objection of the adjoining parish council, that's Cossington. The host parish council originally recommended approval, but the site is actually closer to Cossington than Woolhampton. I've got an update from the parish councils that I will read out in due course. Red line showing on arrow pointing to the site. So this is Cossington, we're on the west side. I'll come to the next slide, showing a little bit more detail. So this is Cossington here, Woolhampton over here. The actual site is actually this rectangle here. So it's located in and amongst a number of other existing consents for gypsum travellers. So that's a consented site. These are historically consented sites, originally consented on appeal. There is a site over here, and then there's this consent, and then there's food on its western side. So there is a number of sites, and this one is located between 2 existing permissions. This permission here is in the process of being built out, as you can see from some photos I'll present in a second. This image up on the right, I've just put, this is an old image that we managed to find on a file, which is usually just illustrate some of the history in a bit more detail, say we have to mock something up, but it just shows some of the consents, because it said vacant here, but this is effectively the application that we are dealing with in front of us, but we've got consents, down here on part of this, we've got consents here. I think this, when this application came through for this parcel here in about 2005, they put this together. So I think maybe for the benefit of members, but yes, so that's got consent, that's got consent, and that's got consent. So we are sort of looking at what is effectively one leftover bit of land between a number of existing consents. So as I stated, the site is to the west of Cossington, and is between existing other consents. The application that I said this is a revised scheme. So originally we had an application that was submitted in last year. That was for 9 pitches on the site. That was refused under delegated powers on 3 grounds. So there was an absence of ecological information. You can see it was the Greenfield site from the aerials. There was an absence of phosphates mitigation. I'll come on to the phosphates issue in a second. And we had concerns about the number of pitches and what that meant in terms of density and layout and being able to achieve mitigation for things like phosphates, ecology and other matters on site. So we have a revised scheme in front of us now, which is just for 4 pitches. There's the red outline. It just shows, and also just shows the access which comes out. It's the same shared access that serves all the other pitches down here that comes out up onto the road there. So this is the site layout as proposed. So these are the pitches 1, 2, 3, and 4. It got an unusual sort of layout, and that's because of phosphates. And I'll show the map in a second to illustrate how we've got to that. But this is the layout that's proposed. They are showing this as sort of a wildflower meadow. I mean, it's not proposed that there's any development here. They are showing a play area on here. I'm conscious that they've done that on other sites in the area, and there's no policy requirement for us to require play areas. And I wouldn't want that to sway anyone's judgment in when looking at the merits of the application, because we're not trying to secure a play area, and we wouldn't want to put conditions on that don't necessarily, if we are to grant it, to secure that, because there's no requirement for it on a scheme of this size. So in terms of policy context, and going over some ground that I've just covered about 5 minutes previously. So traveller proposals, they are determined in accordance with the development plan. It states they should limit sites in the open countryside that are away from existing settlements, but they should respect the scale of and not dominate communities or place undue pressure on infrastructure. So, and in terms of relevant policy, that's policy D8. So that applies as I stated earlier. We don't have any allocated sites, so we have to apply a criteria-based approach. So with that criteria-based approach applies similar tests as to our government policy. So yes, there is an outstanding need, as I mentioned. So that's a residual need of 26, it'll be 25 with the permission we've just granted a few minutes ago, but still an outstanding need for pitches. And again, that weighs in our considerations. And the need to demonstrate a 5-year supply continues to weigh in our considerations. So just in terms of getting a context of the site, so the top photo, so this is the Greenfield site here is the application site. So this is just looking along the top boundary. So you can see that building is the day room that's associated with part of this site, which had only been partly built out at the time that photograph was taken. And this again, looking over it here. And then this is more stood on the access point, looking back across the site. So looking towards the mature tree line boundary. So that separates the site from this is sort of an area of open play area that serves the village. There's play facilities over in its sort of top northeast corner. So that's a mature tree boundary that sort of runs all the way along here. The lower photo is sort of stood at the lower part of the access, looking back up the tracks, back up towards where the highway is. We can see more built form to do with some of the other pictures that are already in that locality. This one is looking from the access point back down towards the site. And then again, this one here, looking back up towards the site. So since those photos I took for the application we had last year, so they are about so things have moved on a little bit, because as I said, the sites that have got consent to the north, they are in the process of building those out. They've been building them out for some time. So you can see this photo is more recent. So there is more built form in this area here than there was previously. There are also a number of caravans on the land to the south, which you can see here. Now, so as I stated, that also has consent for a number of caravans. So I think the photos from the first one showed it much more green and open, but the consents are something we also have to take into account, and the applicants that benefit from those consents are in a process of making use of them. So in terms of the assessment, as I stated, it lies between the existing consented sites. So we would give consideration to the size of the site and is it proportionate to scale that does not dominate the settled community. And that's a consideration we've had to have on this one, as on other of the applications that have been in this vicinity. In terms of infrastructure capacity, does the site sort of overload any known infrastructure capacity? Well, the Highway Authority have commented in detail. They don't raise an objection. They've made the site visit, consider the access. Education aren't objecting in terms of the level of provision of school places in the area. In terms of visual dominance, is the site and or combined with the others resulting in additional visual dominance and over dominance of the existing settlement? Well, as you can see from the photos, very set back from the highway, very set back from the public highway. So there's actually very limited visible change from the public vantage points, and those vantage points are from the top of the access track. It may be visible from the adjoining playing fields through the mature planting screen that already exists there. You get some filtered views. I would think you will see some built form through those trees when it's there. They do provide quite a degree of screening. But we would consider that for those, given where it is, given it's nestled effectively between two existing consents, set some way back from the home, that actually isn't going to give rise to an over-dominating effect. As I mentioned, in terms of ecology and phosphates, so the image on the left shows the phosphates catchment map. So you can see that the catchment map shows the area that surface water in this area, if it has potential to run off into the Ramsar. So the Ramsars are some distance from here, but the catchment is bigger. We're right on the edge of the catchment here. You can see the catchment map goes right up to the edge, right up to the site and cuts across it. So that meant that in terms of phosphates, part of the site gives them a phosphates problem, part of it necessarily doesn't. So that in effect has dictated their layout. So they've amended their layout in accordance with the layout on the right hand side to remove built form from that part of the site and to put drainage for the septic tank, which is proposed in the west part of the site with conditions to secure that. So now we had, as I said, refused the previous scheme on ecology grounds and phosphate grounds. So we have ecology surveys. They make a number of recommendations about precautions during works, mitigation measures, and enhancements. And those enhancements proposed would include additional planting on the eastern boundary between it and the playing fields to try and just beef up that boundary a little bit further. So just to secure some additional planting, some additional screening, so that would have that secondary effect of providing screening whilst also having ecological benefits. So the ecologists have reviewed all the information that's now come in with this application. And they aren't objecting. So they consider that the previous ecological reasons, phosphate reasons, have been overcome. In terms of other matters, so as I say, highways, development is served by vehicle access onto Coslington Lane. There's existing access which serves a number of sites. It does emerge onto a straight section of road. They did decide that they didn't raise any objections subject to conditions. In terms of the public sector quality duty, same as the last application, that we had to have due regard to come into a decision. So I'm going to summarise, but I'm going to come back to the Parish Council's latest additional points that I need to read through. But in our view, our recommendation is that with reduction in scale and the number of units alongside the ecology and phosphate impact changes, they have addressed the previous reasons for refusal, and therefore our recommendation is to grant approval. The Parish Councils basically stated that neither Woolhampton or Coslington Parish Councils will be able to be represented. It's quite long, so just bear with me while I read it down. Will be represented at the Tuesday's Care Development Committee meeting to discuss the application. However, there are several issues that should be brought to the committee's attention, and it would be appreciated if this letter could be read out when the application is considered at the meeting. The main objection is that of over-domination of the nearest settled community, caused by the proliferation of travel-related development along the western boundary of the Coslington playing field. The case officer counters this suggestion with numbers, and the off-repeated statement regarding the local authority thoughtful and traveller site provision. However, to local residents, the sense of domination is very real and has arisen through uncontrolled expansion of sites in recent years, most frequently through unauthorised development subsequently receiving permission despite contravening earlier conditions. Constructive attempts to address this matter with the local planning authority have yet to bear fruit, with promises consistently not met. A recent formal complaint regarding this was upheld. There is a concern of that amendments to the application were not brought to the attention of consultees, which would provide the opportunity to review comments made a long time earlier in the light of application changes and other related changes in the vicinity. In all likelihood, Wolverhampton Parish Council will have changed their approval recommendation conditions to an objection. Local planning history has shown that planning conditions to control such development are of limited use, as evidenced by the widespread flouting conditions and retrospective planning applications which routinely receive approval. This application is approved despite the above, therefore strongly recommended that the landscaping conditions require physical implementation before the occupation of the first pitch, not just the production of plants. There should also be a condition relating to surface water management, an important factor in the area peppered with natural springs, and one which has allowed to leave, which has allowed to have been ignored in recent related developments with evidential detrimental results. Finally, the planning system generally appears to be placing more reliance on local councils when considering applications, which makes the assumption that councillors regularly attend parish meetings, are involved in and have an active awareness of parish matters, something which cannot be universally taken for granted. I mean, I think I've got a bit to unpack in their comments there. I'm happy to comment on any of that if anyone feels it's potentially of merit. They've covered quite a bit of ground.
Well, only that they've made allegations of uncontrolled development, and is that the case in this particular site?
Well, this site is not. There is no activity taking place on this site, so I think that I don't believe they're making that comment in regard to this particular application. I think they're talking about and other applications have come forward. Previous applications that we've seen, you know, there's a part retrospective application, and some of the other applications have come forward on a part retrospective basis. You know, that has happened. They get away from that. I think they've raised queries about like conditions on other applications, and I think the site they're talking about is possibly Henshaw Paddocks on the north side of the road. We've had applications in the last couple of years, and one of them was there was a play area shown on that site. And there was a condition about the play area, and actually we then had a subsequent application for a further pitch, and we said we recommended approval for it on the basis that play area wasn't required by policy, and we made life harder for ourselves by putting a condition on to secure it when actually we didn't need it, and when it came around to saying is it needed because we want to put an extra picture on it, we said it isn't needed. And there's probably a lesson to be learned in that, which is why I've said to members about let's not get too waylaid by the player shown on the location plans. So I think there is merit, and there's not one proposed yet, in attaching a condition for details of surface water drainage. And there should be a condition on this consent to secure details prior to commencement. I think that is absolutely needed, and that should have gone on the report. In terms of the complaint that they reference, what they did request going back some time was a meeting with our previous assistant director who went out to see the parish council. Stuart Howlett went out with Nick Taylor, head of policy, to do a site visit. There was due to be a follow-up with that. Mr. Howlett's employment terminated, and Dawn DeBreeze, our service manager, picked it up in his absence. There wasn't a complaint himself held. What Dawn offered to them was an apology about how long it had taken for us to follow up on that initial site meeting. And we did have a meeting with myself and her and the parish council here to follow up on some of their concerns. So, and they have concerns about it, and obviously we have policies that we need to apply and approach we need to take, and obviously we're coming from two different places, but I think that puts a bit more flesh on some of the issues and that they have raised, and also the way we've had to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Titcher. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate Dean on his report. You covered things. It's not an easy job. As a planning committee, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. If we don't sort it out, just chucking the ball around, and it's gone on long enough anyhow, sounds like it. And with a couple of things you covered there with the landscaping and the foul water, You know, that's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say, really. Other people make their own comments.
Just to confirm, there are no, well, it's obvious, there are no speakers on this item, so, any other comments from members? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like some clarification from Dean, if I could, please. Condition 7 says the site shall be served by a PTP installed in accordance with the details on the submitted and approved revised site plan submitted 19th of April 2023. That document isn't available online.
It should be. It's a site plan that have been shown. Because effectively that is that site plan.
Yeah, that's the site plan that's up there, but there's no detail on the PTP there. I have been wrong before. It was a Tuesday.
I'm trying to find no, I'm trying to find the report that you told me. So, I mean, that is the plan. So whether it's online or not is something that I can address outside of the meeting.
But that drawing is online,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have details of the package treatment plant.
I think what they're referring to is the location of drainage field. So what that refers to is, as you can see on the plan, that the package treatment plant is indicated here.
Yeah.
Package treatment, it has what's called a herringbone drainage field.
Yeah.
They need to install the drainage field in that location, so it's not in the phosphates area.
Yeah.
What this condition is trying to do is not to make sure that the drainage doesn't go into this part of the site, because that has the potential, quite low, but that has the potential to drain back into the Ramsar site and therefore have a negative effect. So what the condition the ecologist wanted was just to make sure that we had the details of where the drainage field was going to go. I think they had the details of the package treatment plant, they were satisfied. So they just want to make sure that effectively it drains in this direction, not in the other direction. That's what they're trying to do.
So the ecologist is happy with the specification of the PTP that's been.
I think is the concern here that you're worried that we're not sure what the package treatment work is itself.
Or whether it's going to be sufficient for this.
We could, if there isn't a condition, we've got the main point of the condition that Dean is referring to is make sure the drainage field goes in that location.
Yes.
So it's outside of the catchment area.
Yes.
If you want the surety that we've had a look at the package treatment plant itself, then we would need an extra condition.
Because there were concerns in some of the comments from interested parties that the waste from the previous one may not have been entirely up to scratch, and the worry is that this. Well, I know we can only deal with the application that's in front of us, but
I think there are comments that are put on about like if you have an existing site and you're going to plug some additional caravans into it, the septic tank you've already got or package treatment plant you've got in there, is it going to be big enough to take the additional ones?
Yes.
We're talking here about a brand new package treatment plant designed to meet the needs of this particular development. I am confident the ecologists have reviewed the details. If it is helpful to have the satisfaction that is confirmed off by an amended condition, say details of the PTP to be submitted and approved, we can do that. I think my view is that the ecologists just were satisfied that about where the outfall went. Well, that was their main consideration. That's where they come from with the condition. But if members feel strongly about amending the details to be submitted, we can adjust the condition.
Could we do that, Cassie? Yeah, sorry.
If it's agreed by members, then we can, yes.
Could I propose that we ask for that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, noted, councillor Bradford and then councillor
I'd
Filmer.
like to say for information, these new serial disposable things you have put in your garden for cottages or whatever, and for caravans, this is probably it. When you install them, what comes out the other end is drinkable. Right, I'll say no more than that. I've experienced it, so I know. Right. There you go. And you all know.
Thank you.
It costs about £8,500 to put one in.
Okay, we've got councillor Filmer next.
Couple of questions if I can. One was where Vice Chair went in terms of packet treatment plant. Could we, if we're looking at that also, I don't know whether we necessarily got a trigger for when it's got to be installed and operational. It says it's got to be installed in accordance with the plans, but on a number of these sites, we have had difficulty sometimes with trigger points as to when these things get installed and operational.
I think, yeah, you would want it prior to first occupation, and I think if members, also on the other point, if members were minded to request condition that details which be submitted, we probably should address that prior to commencement. But it should come forward in general conformity with that plan. So that sets the broad parameters, but actually the detail that still needs to be agreed by condition. That's an option if members don't want.
Thank you. Also, in terms of triggers on the biodiversity enhancements, this is condition 4. It says that it will be before the first use of the site approved, but the landscaping plan above it doesn't have a similar trigger. I think the same sort of trigger would be useful on that again, just to make sure that it's done before plan comes into use. Other couple of things I wanted to ask about was this originally was 9. I think the report says it then went to 7. It's then gone to 4. I'm guessing the other 3 were in that white piece of land where an effective packet treatment work is going. So what protection, if any, is there on that white land that doesn't suddenly become another second, third extra unit? And you mentioned the wildflower meadow. Is that going to be protected under the biodiversity? Or at some point in time when something happens with phosphates, could we be seeing that wildflower meadow suddenly turn into another part of a site? I know we can't make provision for that now, but I'd just like to know if we're making a big thing that it's a wildflower meadow, then are we in the same situation we were with the play area, that we think it's something, but actually it could be something completely different?
Totally no, I'm not making a big thing that it's a wildflower meadow. So they will have to submit a scheme of biodiversity enhancements, and that's going to include a new planting along that boundary. Okay, so, and any new plant, say we get a scheme in the future that comes forward and compromises that planting, for argument's sake, or compromises the drainage field we've approved, then that will be a material consideration that is probably going to weigh pretty negatively in the balance of any future application. But the wildflower meadow itself, I wouldn't suggest that we get too tied to, but nonetheless, there's going to be a package of enhancements that will need to come forward. You're right about the triggers. I think there's a trigger in the ecological one. I'm not sure there's a trigger in the landscape. So it says it needs to be submitted prior to commencement. I would look for landscaping. I know the parish council said the landscaping should go in pre-occupation. Normally we wouldn't do that because it can be quite like, you don't want the landscaping to go in and then you move a load of heavy stuff on and it gets damaged in effect. So whilst it takes longer, usually I would put on prior to the end of the first planting season following first occupation. So it gives it the chance that actually they get the heavy stuff in and out or in and on and settled and then do the planting, because there's no point putting stuff on that's going to get ruined in effect. So I would suggest that slightly later trigger if we're yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, happy with that. And the final question was just, it comes from the 2 parishes and we're all aware that there are a number of other sites around this patch. At what point does cumulative impact take effect?
It's a judgment, and it's a judgment of various factors. As I said in the presentation, there's different ways you can look at it. Visual dominance, and I think this one's quite hard with visual dominance, nestled within 2 other sites. If you're looking at other applications that are much more visually prominent, combined with the fact that there's a number of other sites, then maybe actually that tips that much more negatively in favour. I think some of the parish council's comments that they made previously seem to sort of verge on there's a sort of a fear locally, and that's, you can be very careful about how, in planning terms, how we need to take if considerations that are material into a planning rather than sort of someone's concerns about something that might happen or something that's prejudicial potentially. Infrastructure concerns could be another one if we end up sort of being, in terms of, if the infrastructure providers start saying, that the level of, services in the area is struggling to cope, that would be another factor. But we'll weigh each application on its merits. But certainly, the visual thing I think could be more of an issue if there are more sites coming forward, on greenfield areas, that are in sort of prominent positions on the, as part of the the area of Lambton, Coslington, and Wolverhampton in the future.
So should we just summarise the changes to the conditions, as I think I've understood. Do you want to do it, Mr. Newman?
Only because I've been jotting them down as we've gone along. Firstly, condition 4, first bullet point, being a trigger for the implementation of the approved landscaping. Condition 7 needs to be amended to secure the submission of the detail of the packaged water treatment plant and its implementation generally in accordance with that drawing prior to forest occupation. And then we need a 10th condition, surface water. Yes. To be submitted probably prior to commencement and implemented prior to occupation.
Can I add something, actually?
Yes.
In terms of the PTP, are there two conditions that prior to commencement, the PTP shall be submitted, details of the PTP shall be submitted and approved by the LPA, and then the second condition is the PTP shall be in use prior to first occupation. Is that two conditions?
We can craft that into a single condition as a variation of number 7.
Thank you. Any more comments or proposals, if there are no more comments? Councillor Hendry.
Go on, you're talking into it. Voice to grant permission.
Okay. With the additional conditions, thank you. And seconder for the proposal, Councillor Grimes. Thank you. So we've had it proposed and seconded to grant permission. All those in favour, please show.
That's how let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 4.
And any against?
None against.
And any abstentions? One abstention. Okay, thank you. That brings the meeting to an end. Thank you everybody for contributing. And just leaves me to wish you a happy Christmas and